So a while ago, I finished playing Parasite Eve and came to the conclusion that I did not enjoy playing it. I had some issues with the gameplay that really soured my opinion of the whole experience, even though I found the characters, world, and story to be very cool. And it is because of this interest in everything that is not the gameplay that I am more than willing to take a swing at the sequel, for I heard that Parasite Eve II happened to be quite different from the first, in terms of both gameplay and how the plot and world building are handled. I hope to find a game that aligned more with what I had imagined at the moment I learned that Parasite Eve was a survival horror JRPG, as opposed to whatever the fuck Parasite Eve ended up doing. And after playing through this game twice, I think I found exactly what I was looking for. Parasite Eve II takes place a few years after the end of the first game. Aya Brea is no longer working for the NYPD and has joined the brand new Mitochondrial Investigation and Suppression Team, or MIST for short, a special team working out of the FBI whose job is to hunt down dangerous creatures called NMCs, the mutated monsters brought into existence by the evolved mitochondria spread by Eve's shenanigans in Parasite Eve I. Yes, they're still around, but are not as common to come by as they were during the NYC incident. Most civilians don't even know they exist for sure, only hearing rumors about weird animals from time to time. Upon receiving a lead, MIST quickly sends hunters to eradicate the NMCs and cover up the incident. Due to her cool mitochondria powers, Aya becomes one of the more capable NMC hunters MIST has at their disposal. After being dispatched to the Acropolis Tower due to reports of NMC activity, Aya discovers most of the local SWAT team has fallen trying to take down the monsters lurking around the place. Upon further investigation, she comes across a new type of NMC which can mimic the form of a human being. She also runs into a suspicious humanoid creature named Number 9, who describes himself as a hunter just like Aya. After a short fight, Number 9 throws a fit because he lost and decides to blow up the building, because blowing up shit solves every problem. Luckily, Aya escapes just in time, but this also leaves a bunch of questions floating in her head. Who was that guy? What is his connection to that new type of NMC? Why the Acropolis Tower? Good thing her boss sends her out to the middle of nowhere to investigate Dryfield, a small desert town that may or may not have any leads that could help Aya answer these questions and possibly prevent another Eve incident from happening. All the characters from the previous game that I really liked are no longer in the picture, which I guess makes sense. Aya has moved on to work in the FBI while Daniel presumably is still doing his thing with the NYPD, and Maeda is off on his own too, devoting his time to his research. Both of these characters get name dropped here and there throughout the game but never make an appearance, and are replaced with a new and larger cast of characters that honestly don't shine as much. I kinda like Pierce, but everyone else is just whatever to me. Whereas PE1 had me invested in both Daniel and Maeda, probably even more than I was with Aya, and she's the protagonist. I think this has something to do with the different ways these games handle their story. In the first game, everything is told through the classic Square Enix Final Fantasy storytelling style. Lots of dialogue and lots of pre-rendered cutscenes. A cinematic style fit for a turn-based RPG that hopes to tell a solid story, and that works. The characters are able to get lots of screen time, which in turn allows for their personalities to really shine through to the player. Parasite Eve II, however, seems to work more similar to a specific horror game rather than a JRPG. A horror game that happens to be very popular. One that was released in the mid-90s and has gone on to grow into a massive multimedia franchise about hot guys and gals fighting bioterrorism. Resident Evil. I'm talking about Resident Evil. There are brief cutscenes sprinkled throughout the game, but they really only tell you what to do next. It's by examining various items, reading notes, and the little MGS codec-like convos that come up whenever you go to save, where you learn more about all the characters that are in the game, and also learn what the heck is going on plot-wise, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, the way I rate games is basically on a scale from 1 to 10 based on how similar the game is to Resident Evil. And lucky for me, it gets even better with the gameplay of Parasite Eve getting thrown out the window for what is quite literally Resident Evil with numbers. So if someone had to ask me how I would describe Parasite Eve, I would say a sci-fi JRPG with survival horror elements. Now for Parasite Eve, all you would have to do is swap JRPG and survival horror with each other and you would get an equally accurate description. The lovely ATB, leveling, and equipment systems are all replaced with motherfucking tankies.
Yeah, boy!
It's magnificent. They are a bit stiff and Aya's run animation looks quite silly, but you definitely get used to it after a few minutes of playing. Tank controls aren't the only thing that was added, there are actual puzzles now, the kind that make you think a bit sometimes. A lot of them just require you to check your surroundings to find parts of a passcode or something like that, like the bridge puzzle in Acropolis Tower. Across the map in a restaurant there's a page chilling on a bulletin board with 6 music notes that tell you what the bridge code is. Or that one puzzle where you have to figure out the ages of 2 dead guys by finding portraits of them in hotel rooms and put them together to open up a cash register to get a handy dandy key. It isn't anything that requires a shit ton of brain power. You just take some time to decipher the hint the game is giving you, then look in the right places for the answer, though there are a few puzzles where the hints are so vague or non-existent that I had to trial and error my way through it. But that rarely comes up and is not a super big deal, to be honest. Parasite Eve II's battle system has almost been completely changed and now plays more like an action game. Sure, you can still run around and dodge attacks like you could in PE1, but there's more of a focus on skills rather than fancy stats and equipment. There's no more taking turns with the enemy to attack. Everything is in real time and the stakes are higher than ever because the enemies in this game mean business and will absolutely kick your shit in. I know one of the biggest beefs I had with Parasite Eve I was that it was too damn easy. Nothing put up a real fight and that bored the hell out of me, but boy did Square really knock it out of the park with this one. In the beginning of the game, when you're getting your bearings, things are simple and clean. Enemies are slow and don't do much damage at all, allowing you to make mistakes, learn from them, and move along. But when you start changing locations, that's when things start to heat up, with some normal encounters easily being able to wreck your shit, over and over again, forcing you to rethink your weapon and ammo choice or your strategy, trying out new things to see what works, or experimenting with your surroundings to see if you're missing something. Or I guess you could just brute force it and hope you make it. That works. Not all the time, but sometimes. Your HP relatively stays the same throughout the whole game. Unlike Parasite Eve I, where your max health grows gradually as you level up, there are no levels, and because of this your HP doesn't grow as you ruthlessly rip NMCs limb from limb. There are, however, various armors you can equip that will raise your base HP and health upgrades hidden throughout the game for those who check every nook and cranny. I only found like 3 in my first playthrough, which doesn't make much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. The point is, Aya doesn't really get much stronger than she is at the beginning of the game. Almost everything about her stays the same except for the power of her parasite energy abilities, which can be upgraded over time. The changes to her damage output and the damage she can take are insignificant, while the enemies she faces only get more powerful and more tricky to deal with. It really gets across that you are helpless feeling that I expect from every survival horror title I play, and though in most other games this is done with a very limited supply of ammo at the player's disposal, Parasite Eve II manages to replicate the same effect just by having that gap in power and numbers in most cases. The risks you take when entering battle get higher and higher the longer you play, and it gets to the point where just one fuck up is enough reason for the game to swiftly humble you. I don't know, I like the feeling combat in this game gives me. It keeps me on my toes and makes my tummy feel warm and fuzzy. Speaking of feeling warm and fuzzy, sometimes you get a partner who will fight alongside you. This is Kyle, private detective, hot video game guy, Aya's love interest. He seems like an okay dude. In certain parts of the game, he will follow you around and help out in battle. His AI is a little funky, but for the most part he does a great job and deserves a sticker. I don't quite see the point of having these partner segments in the game, especially since they only last a few minutes apiece. I feel like this partner mechanic would make more sense in the first Parasite Eve, just not this one. But I do appreciate his help because he usually has a weapon that is leagues ahead of my weapons damage-wise. Although from a distance the combat looks kinda similar to PE1, below the surface are many changes made to the game's formula that all come together in order to make killing mutated, bloodthirsty monsters fun, where the first game somehow failed and created a snooze fest for me. I'm not saying it's perfect or that it's definitively better than the previous game's battle system because it does have its issues. I know that many people can't get behind tank controls even though they are literally the greatest thing to ever grace this earth, but we will have to agree to disagree on that. Aya turns super fucking slow when you switch your target, which often led me to shooting too soon thinking I got the timing right only to find out that I completely missed the enemy and hit a wall. But besides that, I really like how the game plays. So much that I ended up going through most of it in the first sitting because I was so hooked with the fact that this is quite literally a Resident Evil game with slightly deeper and more rewarding combat, and that makes me happy. I also wanted to talk about how cool and varied the bosses are in this game. The big chonky guy at the motel is quite possibly the coolest boss out of any PS1 game I've played, which is strange because I can't really think of any aspect that stands out to me, to be completely honest. The fight itself is very simple, but it does have somewhat of a grand feeling to it, especially the first time you get to that part. In a lovely square pre-rendered cutscene, Aya is taking a well-deserved shower when she is interrupted by the motel shaking, and in comes the man of the hour from down the dark desert street, breathing fire into the clouds while letting out loud elephant noises, making its way towards the motel, setting fire to anyone who dares to get in the way of him kicking Aya's ass. It's very reminiscent of a kaiju film. Godzilla vs. Elephant Monster Dude from Parasite Eve II. The trash monster has some major suckage going on with a quick lure and trap towards the end of the battle. There's not one but two thick boys that don't really put up a fight, but I definitely appreciate their appearance. It seems like almost every boss fight revolves around their own gimmick, which requires the player to switch up their strategy if only so slightly to overcome the challenge, and that's pretty neat. Though I will admit that I'm not a fan of a few of these fights, usually due to either them destroying me repeatedly because I get saltier than the seasoning that comes with a pack of ramen, or due to them being flat out boring. As cool as I think number 9 is, his second fight is literally the most sleep-inducing part of the game. Which is funny because the first battle is actually neat and you would think that they would step it up next time, but it just doesn't happen. And since I'm on the topic of things I don't care for, I wanted to talk about how Parasite Eve II completely shits itself in the second half of the game, with the atmosphere and story taking a noticeable dip in quality depending on the ending you're going for. So Parasite Eve II, just like the first game, spans over 2 CDs. On disc 1 there are 2 major areas the game lets you explore, the first of which is the Acropolis Tower. There's this really cool dynamic camera that follows Aya on the way to the entrance of the building. She walks past injured SWAT members, crashed cars, and fires in the streets, setting the tone for the things that Aya would experience once inside the building. The horrors that were in store for her. Dozens of cold, lifeless bodies lying about with just enough evidence that whatever caused this is still around lurking in the shadows. The ambient music that is sometimes present and Aya's echoing footsteps are the only thing that can be heard as you slowly look for survivors and your target. It is quiet, it is empty, it is unsettling. and even when the enemies do start appearing, there's still creepy moments to catch you off guard. Dryfield gives more or less the same feelings, except now you're in a desert town. The spoopy highlights of this place would have to be the dark dank well system under the town, and this creepy ass house where all you can hear are these blood curdling screams coming from the next room over. Throughout both of these sections, you are running through plot beats, interacting with side characters, and finding lore drops, which all help to maintain a good story to gameplay balance, but when you get to disc 2, all that seems to go out of whack. Now this could just be me, but I honestly had no idea what was going through the second half of the game on my first playthrough. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why I was doing the things I did. The motives of all the characters felt extremely hazy, and a good 80% of the second disc takes place in an uninspired underground lab. Square took the most visually boring location in the game and decided to make you stay there the longest out of any area. NeoArc, on the other hand, is pretty neat looking, but you don't stay there for too long. Depending on the route you take in the second half of the game, character interactions happen way less often than they did in the first disc. If you're making your way towards the bad ending, then you would be put on what I would call the Kyle route. And on this route, with the exception of chatting with your boss every time you go to save, and a girl that is introduced right at the end of the game, the only other character you come in contact with is Kyle. Occasionally, you will run into Kyle while exploring, and most of your interactions will play out something like this. Hey, we haven't seen each other for a while. Flirty Kyle noises. I'm gonna follow you around, and after a while, I'll give you an item, then disappear again. Okay. It really feels like a whole lot of nothing to me. I understand Kyle is supposed to be this mysterious guy, but come on game, you gotta at least make him a little more interesting if he's the only one I'll be talking to for a while. It is also on this route that much of the second half of the game feels quite aimless. Instead of constantly moving from point A to B, clearing objectives, and pushing the story forward like you do on Disc 1, Disc 2 feels very stagnant and disjointed. You're rarely moving with purpose. Most of the progress you make will be made only by blindly wandering around uninspired halls until you trigger some event that would most likely leave you to blindly wander some more. I found myself getting stuck quite a lot, rarely knowing what I'm supposed to do next or what my objective is in general. And surprisingly, this isn't even a problem when you are following the Pierce route. Instead of meeting with Kyle, Pierce will take his place most of the time, and he does a great job at explaining what you need to do and where you need to go. Taking this route also opens up events that further explain what the hell is going on in this game, uncovering conspiracies, answering questions that were left unanswered in the Kyle route, along with other stuff that make the story so much more comprehensible, and makes for a much better playing experience. Unfortunately, not even that can change the fact that the plot twist towards the end is easily the worst plot twist I have ever experienced. It makes absolutely no sense at all, and I don't understand why this was even a thing, to be honest. If you know, you know. But anyway, despite my issues with the story, specifically with how the Kyle route was handled, I really liked Parasite Eve II. I find it way more enjoyable than Parasite Eve 1, and I would probably put it up with some of my favorite games I've played this year. I definitely would say that the first one is the more consistent game out of the two due to the quality of the second dropping after Disc 1. But for me, the highs of 2 are better than anything 1 has to offer. If you haven't played either of these games, please don't take my word as gospel because my opinions are very, very, very subjective. It seems that even fans are split between which of these games is the better one, and that really stems from how different they are from one another. I know they don't seem like it, but they appeal to two very different demographics. Parasite Eve 1 is for the JRPG fanboys who want a grand story with lovable characters, and on the other hand, Parasite Eve 2 is for survival horror fanboys who don't care too much about the story so long as the game provides a unique twist on the survival horror formula that makes the game worth experiencing. So it's not really a question of which game is better, but really which one aligns more with what you look for in a video game. The games are both about the same in quality, even though that quality is focused in different areas, so it just comes down to personal preference. It sort of reminds me of Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2. One is a serious horror film that is as bizarre as it is frightening, and 2 is a comedy film where there's a cowboy that demands a chainsaw duel with Leatherface in order to save the radio show host that Leatherface has been in a complicated romantic relationship with since the beginning of the movie. I absolutely love both films, but it's very clear that they were created for two entirely different audiences. I could understand why someone would like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 over 1, just as well as I could understand why someone could enjoy Parasite Eve 1 over 2, even if I personally don't agree with that. I don't know where I was going with this. So watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and play Parasite Eve 2. You probably won't be disappointed. Maybe.